Well, hello, hello.
Well, hello in this last week of April.
Can you
Can you
believe
believe that
it?
already, Leanne?
This year is flying. And thank you, Jason, for scaring the hell out of me just about how quickly this year is going.
Yes. Well, it'll be May Day tomorrow for you. Or
Yes,
no. Yes. Yes, it will be.
yes, yes,
Yes.
will be. And wow, wow, that's all I can say.
Yes.
So, hello, everyone. I'm Leanne.
And I'm Jason, and this is Let's Talk.
This is a space where no topic is off limits. We'll be discussing things from resilience and leadership, money, relationships, mindset, and so much more.
And always here at Let's Talk, we bring different perspectives, real life stories, and honest conversations because the things we don't often talk about really are the things that matter most and need to be talked about.
Yeah. So, our goal here is simple. It really is to spark new ideas, to shift mindsets, and to give you practical tools that you can use in your leadership and your life.
Yeah, so like we said, welcome back to Let's Talk. We are in series three, The Art of Intentional Living. Can't believe we're already at episode 26 already. So far in this current series, we have talked about the knowing doing gap, clarity and vision, what our values look like in action, and managing energy over burnout so you can win through your day. And today we tackle a belief that keeps so many people stuck. Um, and it's that I just need more discipline. Um, so you hear it everywhere about I need more discipline. I need to be stronger. I want more. Just push through it. But there's more to that. And I'm going to hand it over to Leanne to kick us off on the more to it.
Yeah. And I want to start off by the myth of discipline because there's really a myth in relation to how much we can get done. Um, because what if discipline isn't actually the real answer? We think that that's all we need to be more disciplined. But what if the issue isn't you? What if it isn't discipline? What if it's actually your system? Many people assume success comes from willpower, that sheer determination to get things done, or self control, like really, being tough on yourself. Relentless effort also comes in where we feel like we're hustling all the time, right? So when they struggle because those things aren't working necessarily, people conclude that they're lazy, that they lack discipline. The story that they tell themselves is that I start stuff, but I never follow through. And I know that that's been a story of mine many times over the
Mm-hmm.
decades. Like, really, I start things, I don't finish things. And what that does, it creates shame. And we know that shame is one of the most unhealthy emotions um, that we can feel. And when we feel shame, we then have less momentum. Like we don't actually do what we need to do because we feel like crap about ourselves. So, what I want to share here is that most people don't actually have a discipline problem. Most of us are actually disciplined. We get stuff done all the time. But what we might have is a design problem, a system problem. And that's where a lot of our angst comes from because our intention is pure, but if we don't have the systems in place to support us, then discipline can wane. And that's a natural human condition. I want to say that up front, a natural
Mm-hmm.
human condition. So there's not something wrong with you necessarily, it's the system.
Yeah, which I think follows great into why this thing called motivation, which can feel great, why it often fails. And the honesty, motivation feels great when you're newly inspired about something, right? Or like you've taken something off the shelf, dusted it off, you're motivated, to, whatever it is. It could be your last written song or a poem that you wrote or um, like just something that inspires you at a deep soulful level, right? Also, when you're well rested, I can say when I'm well rested, get that good 8, 9 hours of sleep, I'm up and I'm motivated. But if I don't have the right system in place, that motivation will only last for so long, right? It can also feel great when you're emotionally clear, when your emotions are in alignment, with everything else that's going on versus out of alignment. Or if you're starting something new, right? Like starting a new job, or you're like just getting back, going to the gym, or on a new weight loss diet or something like that, right? There's that motivation that just is there because you feel good about it. But motive often motivation is unstable. So there's this kind of ebb and flow, right? This rise and fall with your mood, you know? I mean, I know when I'm in a not so positive mood, which I know doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen sometimes, like I'd rather just kind of sit and watch Netflix, or do other things. So it's like my motivation is on the fall, or the not the ebb but the flow, right? Also during sleep, when you don't sleep well, when you're overly stressed and you have high amounts of cortisol, running through your body, hormone shifts.
Can relate to that one.
Love that, Leanne. Um, and your environment, right? Like if you're like in an environment where, you know, I just always think of like, when you work internally, right? And you may be in a cube, that's not close to any windows or natural light. It's like that environment can have a huge effect on your motivation. Um, and your reactions to win and losses, right? Like I know when I'm reacting to a win, something great, there's that motivation that's there. But when I'm reacting to a loss, even though I have the awareness on how to deal with it, just kind of, just kind of flattens the motivation, right? Um, so with that, if your success depends on emotion, then it becomes unreliable, right? Motivation is a feeling. It's not a structure that a system will actually put in place. So feelings fluctuate, as we all know, structure holds. Leanne, would you like to help kind of put some of the neuroscience behind it?
Absolutely. And I think it's so important for us to realize that so many things can get in the way of motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We and as you said, often when we start something new, right, we're so gung ho and it's gonna be good, and then you wake up the next day and it's like, I don't feel so great, and that motivation flies out the window quicker than anything else. Um, and that's tough. And then we beat ourselves up, and then we get into this negative spiral, and it's just not pleasant. So
Yeah.
we know that the brain loves efficiency. It will hardwire everything it can in order to be efficient, right? If we had to think about and use willpower and motivation for absolutely everything that we had to do, we would be exhausted before we left home in the morning. And like really, I mean, so it is designed to hardwire everything it can to automate repeated behaviors. And it does that to conserve energy and to conserve our prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of our brain. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why habits form, right? We have habits that we're formed over time that are habitual, that we practice regularly, that have now become habitual processes. So that's, habits that serve us, that are good for us. And that could be things like brushing your teeth every day, or drinking your water, or going to the gym, or, whatever it is. There's habits that we have in place that serve us, and there's habits that no longer serve us. And I don't want to call them good habits or bad habits, because even things that no longer serve us or that we might deem as a bad habit now actually started with positive intent.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I started smoking, which was a bad habit, It started because of the social interaction, because I could go outside, I could get fresh air and take deep breaths. But after a while, that became it no longer served me. It became a bad habit, but it started from
Mm-hmm.
something good. Um, and and I think sometimes we need to think about even these habits that we want to shift or break or create something new in its place. Um, it takes a little bit of effort. But what I want to say is that even the bad habits have a positive payoff. And sometimes it's hard to navigate that until we actually see what the positive payoff is of what we're trying to shift, right? Because if I'm procrastinating and I want to shift that habit, the positive payoff might be that I don't have to put myself out there. It keeps me safe. Even though procrastination is so frustrating, I'm not doing it because there's a positive payoff. So we need to find something that gives us an even better reward than the positive payoff that we're getting. So creating habits is what our brain is designed to do. And when we do that, when we create a new habit, it reduces decision fatigue because it's a habitual thing and we don't have to think about it. Instead of asking daily, will I exercise? Will I journal? Will I save money? The system has already decided whether you'll do it or not based on the habit that you've already created. So
Mm-hmm.
the goal really for us is to have fewer internal battles daily. We don't want to have this conflict of I should do this, but I don't feel like it. We need to put systems in place that support what we want to do. So a powerful life is actually built on fewer internal negotiations. And I think that's really powerful, that if we've got less of that internal resistance and internal negotiations, we have a more powerful life. We end up doing what we need to do because the system supports us. We're not having to use willpower, which is fleeting and dependent on so many things to be just right, like Goldilocks and her porridge, in order for it to
Mm-hmm.
continue. Right? So I think that's the real key. It's really using our internal wiring, what it's designed to do, but to set up systems that support the outcomes that we want to have. And really, that's what we're talking about today, to building systems in place that supports the positive outcomes that we're actually trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's kind of like when you were thinking about or talking about that, Leanne, um, like in my doctoral program, right? As I'm moving, officially have completed all my coursework, on spring break this week, and the next week start everything dissertation. But it actually makes me think kind of ahead of like, yes, I know there's going to be times of motivation of like, okay, let's sit down and write and research and da da da. But then there's going to be a lot of times of like, ugh, I just want to put this on the back burner. Like, I don't want anything to do with it for like the next 2 weeks, which can be a healthy thing sometimes, right? But it makes me think of like, what systems do I need to put in place to make this part of the journey as much of a success that the coursework has been?
Yeah.
Right? Because they really say it's like this is really when your doctoral journey begins.
Yeah. This
Because
is
it
when the
is
rubber hits the road, right?
road. It is you. I mean, yes, you have your advisor chair, but it's you.
Yeah.
So um so I'm actually kind of glad that we're doing this the week before I launch into that big entity of my program. So what
Don't you
with
love
that,
how the universe works with timing, right? Like if you've got awareness, it's like perfect timing.
yes, exactly. So what is a system? Right? A system is simply a repeatable process that makes success easier and failure harder. So, and who wouldn't want success to be easier? I mean, I have both hands up there. And so, what are some examples that we can talk about, right? So I'm going to kind of put these in a few different areas. And Leanne, if there's things that kind of pop up, examples or whatever, feel free to jump in. But I first want to talk about health, right? So, okay, so in the entity of working out, you got your workout clothes laid out. If you have those laid out, it's easier to jump in them, less excuses. You can go to the gym, whether you have to drive, walk, or take public transportation, right? Um, one thing that I've done is reoccurring walk time, right? So several days of the week, I always try to walk right after dinner because it's a good time of the day. Stuff's done. Weather's not so hot. And it's just, it now has become a repeatable process for me. Now, yes, there are some days that I miss because of whatever, but it's so much easier to jump back in like 2 days later, or if I took the weekend off, because it's a new habit that I built.
Can I just
Um,
say something to that if I can,
yeah.
Jason? Because what tends to happen is that people do that and they do it for a period of time and then they miss a day and they go, "Oh, right, I've missed a day, I've broken the habit." But for all new habit creation, there is going to be times where we fall off the wagon and we need to get back
Mm-hmm.
on. Rather than going, oh, well, I'm just going to give up now because I didn't maintain it. Actually celebrate. Well, I've done 16 days in a row. Okay, I've missed one, but tomorrow can be 17. So it's also about looking at the how far you've come as opposed to how far you've still got to go and actually celebrate each day that you're doing it. Like I think that celebration piece is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Because I know you and I are both on this 100-day walk challenge, right? It's like when you're at day, let's say 25, but then you look at the 100, you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
75 days left. Versus like what you just said of celebrate. It's like, well, shit, I've done 25 days already.
Yeah.
Like I look at myself 6 months ago, you know, um, it would have been like, oh my God, to do 25 days. So yeah, so I think there's that reframe. Um, just even in the smallest little ways can help with getting that habit back on track. And this next one is healthy food being visible. Um, you know, I think of it which is like a bad habit, right? But when unhealthy food is visible, like the chips and the cookies and the etc., I'm on, I'm in those bags.
Yeah.
And so, but if you want to create that new healthy habit, put the healthy food visible, like your fruits and your vegetables, etc. Anything else you'd like to put in the health category?
Yeah, I find that one a challenge actually, because I have young people that live in my house that they consume a lot of chocolate chips, all of that sort of stuff. So I have to buy it. But I would even prefer not to buy it because if it's not in the house, then I can't eat it, right? But what I do now is that I still have a chocolate, but instead of having half a bar, I'm consciously having one piece,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that we can't do these other things, but it's about conscious choice around it.
Yeah.
And I think health it's the foundation of everything else. If we don't have good systems in place for our health, then every other part of our life is impacted.
Yeah.
Um, because if you're not healthy, then you can't work well. You can't have good relationships. Like it takes over everything, like literally everything. Um, that's the only thing I wanted to add to it. So for me, I actually also to do this is I put my phone outside my room. So I'd set the alarm and then I'd put the phone far away. Actually, it wasn't outside my room, but it was on the other side of the room. So I literally had to get up. I couldn't just reach over and hit the snooze button,
Mm-hmm.
right? And because I had to get up to turn the alarm off and because my clothes were already set, then I was much more likely to get them on and get out the door and do what I needed to do. And the other thing that I did around health was that I would remind myself how good I felt after the event. Like, I don't know about you, Jason, but after going for a walk, you've got the endorphins going, you've had fresh air, you've had maybe some sunshine, so you've got that serotonin, you've had a bit of a dopamine hit because you feel good and you're proud of yourself for having done it. So even when I don't feel like it, I remind myself how I'm going to feel afterwards, and that
Yeah.
can be motivating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So some more repeatable processes that you can do in the area of money, which we've done a few episodes or a couple episodes on money, and knowing that this is one of the hardest things to talk about sometimes because it is so personal, is, setting up that automatic savings, right? Whether it's, your paycheck, or, your funds are automatically deposited, and then, you have $100, you know, automatically taken from your checking to your savings. So, you don't even really see it in there, right? Or like, when you work internally and you have benefits taken out, right? It's like, yeah, it may be hard to see the first paycheck or two, but then after a while, it becomes a habit, and you're like, well, it's never been there before, so, but it's building something that's repeatable and good for you, and that's operating in the background.
And in
Uh,
relation to that one, I would suggest do it before you even look at it. Like, don't do it after you pay your bills, do it before. I think I mentioned the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, some time
mhm.
ago, and their whole concept is to pay yourself first. And if you can get into the habit of just putting a small amount somewhere else first before you look at living and all your bills and everything else, you'll be surprised at how well you can still save and still manage all the other stuff. If you do it after you pay your bills, there's usually nothing left. But if you do it before, somehow magically it works. I don't know, and I don't know how, but it works. And I've
Yeah,
coached so many people around that. And they all have said, oh no, like there's nothing left. Like I try and save, but there's nothing left. And then so when we flip it on its head and actually do the automatic savings first before everything else, they're often surprised that I've saved money, I've paid all my bills, and I actually have a bit left over. How does that work? So it's because we're shifting our money consciousness around it,
yeah,
right? It's abundance mentality. Um, so yeah, that automatic saving super important, but do it before you do anything else. And I would prefer if you are an employee, get your payroll to actually put that amount into a separate account for you. So you don't even see it in your bank account. It's just automatically going into savings, and
yeah,
it's not you having to do it, but make it automatic as much as you can.
absolutely. Which the next example is bill automation. Um, because then, that just helps in so many facets, right? It's your bills are paid on time. It helps keep your credit stable. It cuts out the worry of, oh my gosh, when is this bill due? Have I paid it? Have I missed it? Is there a late fee? So, it actually cuts out a lot of worry and stress for yourself. And I know sometimes it's hard to make that decision to get on that bill automation, but once you do, you're like, oh my God, like, why didn't I do this like 2 years ago or whatever, right? So I think it merges into just what you were saying, Leanne. And then thirdly, and I think that it was in one of our wealth episodes where we talked about doing a weekly money check-in. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go and look at your spreadsheets in a detailed manner or whatever, but it's just that weekly check-in, self-check-in to say, okay, where am I at financially?
Yeah.
You know, am I in the red? Am I in the black? Am I somewhere in the middle? Because it just keeps that awareness around, and I think it helps you have a better relationship with your money, and the conversation around it, whether you're single or in a partnership or have to manage a family like you do, Leanne. It just, having that weekly small check-in just makes all the difference, even though I know when some of those weeks are hard to do that check-in. But the end results, I think, behooves people so much better than if you don't have it.
Yeah, burying your head in the sand around this topic, around money, isn't the answer, right? The only way that we can manage our money is by looking at it and having a
Yeah.
relationship with it. And sometimes you can do that weekly check in and it can be, holy crap, I'm spending more than I'm earning. What the hell? Right. And it
Yeah.
can, I often find when people put their budgets together and actually look at what they're actually spending, they freak out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, holy dooly, how am I going to navigate that? But if we're doing this weekly check-in, if we're automating our bills and savings, then we know that we've got a little bit of something growing for us, right? Which makes it a little bit better. And, I would do an audit. Like I actually asked ChatGPT yesterday. I said, I've got this, and this piece of software that I'm paying for. Do I need them? Is there crossover? And Chat came back and said, actually, you could eliminate these two because these two do that plus this. And, so we're probably paying for things that we don't even need, that we don't use, that have just, monthly subscriptions or whatever, but it all
Oh
adds
yeah.
up. And so doing this weekly check-in, I would suggest, do the audit. Do I need to be paying all of this? And set
Yeah.
yourself a spending plan. So not a budget, because budgets are a dirty word. We've talked about that before. But what am I allowed to spend this week? And give yourself an amount that you can go to lunch with or buy new shoes with or whatever the case may be. Like give yourself an allowance and manage the rest of it properly.
Yeah.
Oftentimes some bills come in, and I'm assuming it's the same in America, Jason. You can pay annually or you can pay monthly. If you pay
Hmm.
or quarterly, regular payments, usually if you pay monthly, you pay slightly more for the
Hmm.
convenience. So it ends up being a bigger amount at the end of the year. Annual payments are better. But not everybody has access to big amounts of money to pay the bills annually. So, if you need to pay them monthly, then do that, but automate it. So it automatically happens. And then you're on top of things, you're not under things, right?
Yeah.
Because we know that money is one of the biggest stresses. And we need a little bit of stress in our lives, but we don't want to be so distressed that we're hiding from hiding from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw this ad, actually it was earlier today, from the Lamborghini company, that it says one of the reasons we don't actually advertise our cars on TV or in ads is because the people who can afford to buy them aren't aren't sitting around and watching TV, or aren't
True.
sitting around just, doing unnecessary things, right? And it was kind of like, hmm, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Um, so, there's kind of a little uh motivation there. Um,
Kind of leads into the next one around productivity, right? Like, what are you
totally,
actually
absolutely.
spending your time doing? Like, really, the doom scrolling, the Netflix watching. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And with the productivity, you know, it's putting in that habit or that process of like, okay, when you wake up, you get going, like what are your top three priorities for the day each morning, right? Do you have those mapped out in a calendar block, or do you have your other things that need to get done in your calendar, or are they just in here? I used to be just an in here person, outside of work stuff. I was like, oh, I don't need to put this and this on my calendar, which keeps your mind a hopping, but it's something different when it's blocked in a calendar too.
can I speak
Um,
about the neuroscience behind that? Is that okay?
oh,
Because
absolutely.
if we're trying to hold on to information so we don't forget things, we're actually using some of our resources, which fatigues the brain, and we can't actually perform as well as we can. So if we can get it out of our heads and onto paper or into the calendar, it actually frees up your neural resources and it makes you more productive because you're not holding on to that information and trying to work something else out, right?
Yeah.
So getting it onto paper or into your diary. If you look at my diary, I think I've said this many times, like I use electronic diary, and it's like a rainbow. I have different colors for different things.
Yes.
For my kids is one color, for one, the podcast stuff is one color, the coaching stuff is another color, the training stuff that I do is another color. So I can look at my week and I know exactly what it looks like, where I have to be, but I also block time out for deep work, for where I
Yeah.
have to do critical thinking or make decisions or for those sorts of things. So prioritizing and blocking time into your calendar, so super important. Get it out of your head and onto paper or into an electronic calendar. Best thing you can do for your brain.
Yeah. And I think I can't remember which episode, it might have been in one of our well-being episodes, Leanne, that we talked about like for executives or senior leaders, right? Like really, in order to really, and correct me if I'm paraphrasing this wrong, but from what I remember in the conversation, we were talking about that, in order to be successful and impactful and all that as a senior leader or leader in an organization, that you need to really block out those times with no distractions to where you can really do that deep work of whatever it is that you're working on.
Yeah, it stems from a book by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi something. I can never pronounce his surname because it's almost the full alphabet in his surname. Um, but he's got the book called Flow. And then so that stems from to get into that flow zone where it's
Mm-hmm.
timeless, where you're very productive, you need to eliminate all other distractions, right? So turning your phone off, turning your emails off, turning everything else off, locking yourself into a your flow zone, wherever that might be. But also, if you're still holding on to things in your mind, that's going to impact it, right? So get it out onto paper. And then just the other thing around this is focus on one thing at a time, because we know that multitasking is actually it's task switching, which is very fatiguing, and
Mm-hmm.
you make mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
single pointed focus on whatever it is, but eliminating all other distractions is how you get into that flow state. And when you're in that state, you get so much more done. I often say, the week before we go on holidays, we're in that flow state. I don't know about you, but I get so
Mm-hmm.
much done the week before I go on holidays
Yep.
because it's like I've got a deadline, I'm heading away, and I'm in the zone, right? Like I eliminate distractions, I just pump out what I need to. But we can bring that into most days, or at least several times a week, where we need to
Mm-hmm.
do the deep work or the big decisions or the creative stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, the last area that we want to talk about is relationships, right? And that can be, your partner relationships, that can be family, that can be friends, the whole kit and caboodle combined together, right? So, one thing, like if you have a partner or significant other, have a weekly date night, you know, and have it, out of the house. It can even be at the same restaurant, right? Or it can be, like a repeatable, like this is what we do every Tuesday night. Yeah, right.
It's a great
Um,
system to have in place, but sometimes I hear people go, "Well, what do you do?" Like we've been together for 16 years. And so one of the strategies or the systems that I help somebody build in is that they did it by alphabet, right? So
mhm,
every week it would be a different letter of the alphabet, which means that they would get A twice a year because there's 26 letters and there's 52
yeah.
weeks or whatever, for their weekly date night. And then they had to get creative around, okay, what starts with A? Let's go apple picking or whatever it might be. Like it doesn't have to be grandiose, big, expensive things. It could be really small things, but get creative, build the systems in place to support what you want. And a healthy, intimate relationship is super important. And date nights are one of the best things that we can do. And even if you've got young kids, you're modeling good behaviors for
Yeah.
them, for their future relationships. So a lot of parents go, "Oh, I've got young kids. I feel guilty." I get that because I've had young kids and it's a struggle, but it's super important to focus your attention on your significant other. So they're not the insignificant other. Because
Yeah.
as a woman, especially, our time and energy is devoted to children, and our partners can become the insignificant other, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So weekly date nights helps to eliminate that. And if you don't want to do the alphabet, I mean, I don't know about you in the States, but there's books and programs here in Australia now that's you can buy, and it gives you different things. I think it's called, I can't even remember, but I remember I bought it. But it's each week or each time you can open up the book and pick something in the book, and it might be, okay, go and find a waterfall. Great, let's go for a drive and try and find a waterfall. So it just gave you different things that you could do to connect together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the alphabet
Yeah.
scenario. Yeah, because
It's
like,
it, it's really easy. It's simple. You don't need anything dramatic to do it. You just Where are we up to? Okay, D this week. Well, I'm not going to the dentist. What else is D? You know,
Totally. Or when you get to those difficult letters of like X,
yeah,
right? Like it makes you kind of think and get creative and just getting out of that mundane hamster wheel
yeah.
that a lot of couples end up getting in,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And sometimes, if the couples can't agree, then we would alternate each letter. Like each person would have a different letter every, and it's up to you
Yeah.
to come up with it then. And the other person has to just zip their lips and participate. Like there's no complaining, right? But it's a great way to do things. So yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot that can be said there.
Yeah. And also too, just and then I'll move on to the next one. But in this area too, like I've heard, well, we're kind of financially struggling. There's especially if you live in a big city, metropolitan, there are so many free things to do.
Yeah.
You just have to get creative and you know, we have the internet, we have AI that can help us, all that kind of stuff. So so I often have to remind people that, you don't have to go out and spend $150 every Tuesday night, you can, put in that little challenge of like, okay, we have a date night every Tuesday night, but we want to make sure twice a month, we want to make sure that it's a free activity.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Or
it's,
building some health together, or you know what I mean? Like there's different ways, but it's still about that connection piece and the togetherness.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then in the relationships area, there's also this building this process of no phones at dinner. Um, and I know it's so hard. It's so hard. But I think like in your family, Leanne, I think you've spoken about it in some of our podcast episodes that that's kind of a staple rule at your
It's the
house.
rule. It's the rule. There's no phones at the table. And my kids will like try and sneak it in and look, and then you see their eyes kind of going down under the table, and I'm like, phones. Like they can have it after dinner. I'm good with that. But while we're sitting together eating, I don't want you to be on your phones and distracted. And then I often ask them, what's one thing that happened to you today that's great? And, what did you fail at? What didn't work? And
Mhm.
I think those are great conversations to have because you get to see what's going on. But even if you don't want to ask those questions, like what are you grateful for? Just talk about anything. Um,
Yeah.
but if you're all on your phones, there's no conversation.
Yeah. No, I remember one time in my master's program, um, we were at one of our intensives and one of my classmates said, like I literally just put in this rule of no, because she had small kids at the time, right? Um, no phones at dinner. Um, because she says I caught myself that my husband and I were texting each other across from the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was
Totally.
like, and we had those little eyes and ears and observing patterns and behavior and those little minds just suck it up.
Yeah.
And
Again, we're
so
modeling behavior for the future generation.
absolutely,
Not good.
absolutely. So I think that's a big one, and I think it's not an impossible habit to break, to put in a new repeatable good habit. But I think there's a lot of intentionality behind it,
Yeah.
or I should say that has to go behind it. Yeah. And then also doing regular check-ins, like when we were talking in the money world, right? Doing that weekly check-in. It's the same in your relationships, doing regular check-ins, whether that's throughout the day or at certain times of the week. And I know like a lot of check-ins can seem very surface, because it's like, well, we text all day, like we text throughout the day, but it's like, are you really checking in on the other person or each other, at a deeper level than like, how's work today, or you know, communicating something that went well, or it's different when you do it in person versus over a screen.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have anything that you want to say on that.
It's interesting. Most of my friends know that when I'm in my car because that's when I call. because I'm juggling business and I'm juggling family at home. But when I'm in my car, that's the time that I can make phone calls, check in with people, and do it. So the first question is usually, "Oh, where are you heading to or from?" They'll say
Mhm.
to me. But like, I love that because I just did a 4-hour trip or 4.5-hour trip last week. Right, I was in the car on my own. I spoke to some friends that I haven't spoken to in such a long time. Um, and the trip went like that. Like, it was such a quick trip because we were chatting. Yes, I was concentrating, but it was so nice to catch up and connect with people. I felt good, they felt good. It's so important. And we've talked about this a lot, in previous subjects or topics, Jason, that human connection is actually a requirement, fundamental requirement for us to thrive. We're not meant
Mhm.
to isolate, we're not meant to be on our own. So, don't think that you can't check in with people or that they're too busy. Just do it. It makes you feel good and they appreciate it. They just might be so busy that they're drowning and really appreciate the phone call that comes through. So yeah, it's fundamental to our ability to thrive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we've talked through health, we've talked through money, we've talked through productivity and relationships. I think one of the key takeaways out of out of this portion of our conversation is that when you implement systems, they help to reduce the friction and to reduce dependence on mood. You know, so yes, it's like with anything when you have to think, oh God, I got to develop a system around this. So some of the hard work may take place at the beginning, but once you have it in motion and kind of on, you know, what is it? Wash, rinse, and repeat. Um, it makes life a whole lot easier, and it actually frees up cognitive space for you to actually concentrate on other things that will bring you joy and that matter and that will help you live more into your purpose and what you want to get out of life. Um so I don't think that we want to leave people in with there's not a little work that they have to do to develop the systems,
No,
because there is, but I think the long-term payoff is where you're going to get the big aha and kind of release off of your shoulders. Anything else
totally.
you want to put in there?
No, I think you've said that well because it's small pain now for long-term gain. And I say pain lightly, like it just requires a bit of effort, really.
Mm-hmm.
Changing things up.
Absolutely.
The kids may not like not having their phone at dinner if you implement that, but they'll get used to it. And then all of a sudden the conversations will flow and things will be, and then you'll sit there smiling one day going, wow, this is good.
Yeah.
So do what needs to be done, even with your money. One day you'll look at your account and go, wow, I've got, $5,000 saved or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I started with nothing, right? Like the little systems that we can put into place, these micro habits will support your future. And I keep talking about that because it's the future you're wanting to create rather than just existing through life. And
Yeah.
one of the questions I often hear is, I'm smart and yet I'm struggling with this, like with motivation. Why is that? And the truth is because intelligence doesn't beat chaos. I can be as smart as I can be, but if there's chaos around, right, or my moods are out or my hormones are out, like that's not going to beat the intelligence. Like at the end of that actually beats the intelligence, right? I might know what I need to do, but all of those other factors can kick in. So you can be brilliant and still lose to your cluttered environment if that's what you're living in, right? You could lose to unclear priorities because I haven't spent the time to get clear on my priorities, my values, my purpose, that sort of stuff. You can be brilliant and still have no routines or routines that aren't actually serving you. You may have routines in place, but are they serving you? Or alternatively, you might lose to too many choices. Like, there's just too much. And so I'm just not going to make any decision at all because I don't want to make the wrong one or just sheer exhaustion. So intelligence, being smart isn't necessarily the answer here. And as we've established, willpower and motivation isn't either, because they're fleeting, which is why success often looks simple, but it's not. It really isn't.
Mhm.
It's not simple because it isn't, it's easy. It's not simple and it's not easy to start with, but it gets easy, right? And that's the real key here. It's simple when you have systems in place that are well designed. It's simple when
Mhm.
you put in the time now for the benefit later. And so we really want to think about this. You can be brilliant, intelligent, smart, determined, and if you don't have the right systems in place, or you've got systems that actually are sabotaging you rather than supporting you, it doesn't matter how smart you are. So you've really got to do a bit of an audit on your life and go, okay, is my environment conducive to the work that I want to do? Am
Yeah.
I clear on my priorities and my values and my purpose? Am I doing the routines that actually serve me, or do I need to create some more habits or routines or systems that are going to serve me better? And if emotional exhaustion, everyone's at that point at the moment. There is so much happening in the world that's draining our emotions. So, what are you doing? What systems do you have in place to recharge your batteries? Because it's
Yep.
super, super, super important. We want a simple life, and a simple life is full of systems that support us.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I find, when you were talking about intelligence and brilliance, right? It also made me think of like people who are multi-talented in many things, especially in the when it comes to the career world, right? It's like, well, well, I'm good at this, and I'm also good at this, and I'm also good at this, and I'm also good at this. And then you never make a choice, right? It's like, or you never narrow down because you don't have those right tools in place to help you do that audit, like you were talking about. Um, and, you know, um, and I feel like a lot of people just kind of end up living in a lot of chaos um, when it comes to that, because it's just like they can never, they want to live it this way versus like narrow it down. And then if you get into whatever it is, then how can you bring these other talents to be a part of that new opportunity, right? So, what are some practical ways that we can build better systems? So, Leanna and I are going to take you through a few for your toolbox. So the first one that we want to talk about is to identify a repeated failure point, right? So in order to do that, you need to ask yourself a couple of questions. And those questions are, where do I keep relying on willpower, right? And where do I keep starting over, right? And I challenge our listeners, to really take some time to dig deep on this, because, um, no one really wants to relook at their failures, right? But they're learning opportunities to be like, well, yeah, here and here, I really do rely on my willpower or motivation, versus like putting in an actual system. And the thing is, they don't have to be complex systems. Some might be a little more complex than others, right? But it can be a simple system. And then it's that other question. And I know like a lot of entrepreneurs will ask this question of like, where do I keep starting over in my entrepreneurial journey? You know, because there's obviously, if you failed in blank, there's obviously something, a deficiency going on, and a lack of a system in place to actually take that and bring it to the next level. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk on this next
Yeah,
point,
I
Leanne?
just I just want to say in relation to this one, identifying repeated failure points. Um, get really good at pattern recognition. Build self-awareness around that. Because once you see the patterns that aren't serving you, then you can put systems in place that do. And so
Yeah.
then you're not relying on willpower and you're not starting over. You're becoming more aware. And I think that is the biggest key around this one. Pattern recognition is probably one of the greatest strengths that we can build as humans, to actually notice what's happening. What is the failure point? What is tripping me up? Why has this happened multiple times? Like, we don't like to admit it, but we are solely responsible for our life. We are the the one, right? It's no one else necessarily. So if we can lift the rug and have a look, you'll
Mm-hmm.
get much more bang for your buck at the end of the day. The second one that I want to talk about here is to reduce friction. As I said earlier, if we can reduce the friction or the amount of decisions that we need to have, then we're going to be better off. So we can make the desired behavior easier that we want. So, if I want to go to the gym, I'm going to have my bags packed and my clothes out. Like, that's just it. I'm going to put my phone on the other side of the room. My water bottle is going to be filled and I'm going to have it in my diary with calendar reminders, right? So, and my meals,
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm going to do those things. And if I set my systems up to do those things, then it's much easier to get out the door and to maintain my health because the systems are supporting me. As opposed to I'm hitting the snooze button, I've got to find my gym gear, the bag's not packed, my water bottle, where the hell's my water bottle? And then it just gets too hard and we don't do it. So really, make the desired behavior easier, whatever the desired behavior is. I just gave you an example of the gym, but it could be anything that you want. What, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take the resistance away, reduce that friction.
Yeah. And then thirdly is we want to increase friction for what hurts you, right? So what's good for you is what Leanne was just talking about. And then we want to increase the friction for what's actually not good for you. So some of the things is remove tempting apps on your phone, you know, and we all have them. We all have those addictive apps on our phone
Yeah,
that are
they might all
really,
be different, but we've all got them.
we all got them. Yes. And, that are really not serving you in a good way, right? Also unsubscribe from distractions. Um, you know, like there's so much information coming at us, whether it's through text messages or through social media, through emails, through ads, etc. And a lot of those have subscribe or unsubscribe. And if it's a distraction and it's not really benefiting you or presenting value to you, unsubscribe. Um, Another one is keep credit cards out of reach, right? Which I know can be a hard one, because there's a lot of shopping addictions that go on, right? Or, I mean, I know sometimes when people are like low on cash or, unemployed or whatever, it's sometimes it's the credit cards that help keep you afloat, right? But I think there's that money conversation that you need to have of how much. And like you said earlier, Leanne, of like, what's your spending limit for the week? You know? Um, and you can actually make it so intentional as what is my spending amount this week on my credit card? And to get real clear on that. And then also another one is charging your phone outside your bedroom. You know, I mean, I know lots of people. I do this myself sometimes too, as I sleep with my phone underneath my pillow, right? Because I'm like, well, it's my alarm, or it's my white noise maker, or it's whatever, right? But is that benefiting you, or is it actually hurting you? And that's an evaluation that you have to do yourself. So those are some of the examples of where you need to create friction to get the stuff that's not benefiting you or hurting you out of the way.
And then the next part of this is to habit stack, right? So starting a new habit from scratch can be difficult and requires a bit more effort. But if we attach a new habit to an existing habit that's already serving us, then we're going to be able to do that much more effectively.
Mhm.
So habit stacking is really easy. So it might be, while my coffee is brewing, I will do 5-minute planning my day. Or after brushing my teeth, I'll do a gratitude practice. Or it might be, after lunch, I'll go for a short walk. So if we can habit stack, it makes it much easier to do because we've already got established habits in place. Like I said, we've already got routines in place that serve us. So if we want to add something, it's much easier to add it on top of something we're already doing. I think I've spoken about this before, but I wanted to take vitamins and I kept forgetting to take them. So I ended up moving my vitamins to where my toothbrush lives because I brush my teeth every day and then I see my vitamins and then I have them every day. Whereas when they were on
Mhm.
the kitchen shelf, I didn't necessarily do that. That ended up not working for a long time. So then I put them on top of my coffee machine because that definitely happens every morning first thing, right? So, like, so look at what's working and what's not, and don't just assume, oh, it didn't work. Like if you need to move it to something else or attach it to a different habit, which I had to do. But what it's done is that it's made it regular for me. I don't think about it now. I turn my coffee machine on. It's doing its thing. I have my vitamins or what have you, and it works for me. So find habits that are existing that are serving you and add new habits on top of them. Because the more we
Yeah,
can habit stack, the more likely we're going to be to follow through.
absolutely. And the last one is then to standardize key decisions, right? So, which means to create some defaults. So, whether it's around exercise or if it's around money, if it's around your work or sleep, you know, create those exercise days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, savings account, $200 every paycheck goes to savings, work blocks, from 3 to 5 every day. If that's like your creative thinking time or innovative thinking time, that's my deep work block with no distractions. And then a bedtime routine, right? Of like, I want to be up by 6:30 every morning, so I need to go to bed by 10:30 each night, right? And so putting in those defaults so they're standardized, because what comes from that is freedom, which we all want more of that in our life, right? It often comes from structure, and structure comes from systems.
That
So those
that's an
are just,
interesting one because a lot of people think, "Oh, I don't want rules," right? But actually, the more structure we have in place, the more freedom we have to do the things we enjoy.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so these are um some examples and some key strategies that Leanne and I just talked about on how to build those better systems for yourself so that then you can get the freedom
Yeah.
that you want to free up your day to do those extra things or those things that might seem off in the distance because you don't have the right systems in place now, but they are achievable. You just got to do a little bit of hard work at the beginning to make it habitual so that, you know, in 6 months or 3 months or whatever, you can be like, oh my God, wow, like such a difference.
Don't even have to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as we're moving towards the end of our session today, I really just want you to ask yourself a couple of questions because I think these questions will be telling. The first one is, where are you blaming discipline instead of actually fixing design? Right? I don't want you to blame yourself anymore. Not a discipline issue, it's a design issue. And we've got capacity to change that design. So, where are you blaming discipline and blaming yourself rather than fixing the design? The second one is, what one system would make life easier this week? Just one system that would make life easier. Have a think about that and implement it, right? And implement it, habit stack it on top of something else. And then the next one is, what am I making harder than it needs to be? Because we often overcomplicate things. So where can I streamline the process or eliminate stuff that's going on in my mind, right? The struggle, the friction. So yeah, that's the last question. What am I making harder than it needs to actually be? Because this isn't about becoming rigid. That's not what we're talking about here. It's becoming
Mm-mm.
supported, right? And if we're supported, we can show up better, we can do better, we can manage things better. So that's
Yeah.
really what it's about.
Yeah. And, when you say that, Leanne, it makes me think, because there are areas of everyone's life, right, where they're feeling supported, right? And if you just take a little bit back from why you're feeling supported, it's probably most likely because of a system that's in place.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
that's helping with that support. It's just because it's so there and so natural, you're not even looking at the system anymore.
No, it's unconscious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're at that time
Yeah.
where our conversations go so fast. I know we could talk for 2 or 3 hours. Not that people would listen for 2 or 3 hours every week, but um, let's go into our top three takeaways. So before we move into the top three takeaways, just remember this is our series three, The Art of Intentional Living, April through June. Today's episode, and magically, we are here to the top three takeaways. So the first is from today's conversation is motivation is unreliable and systems are sustainable. And I think, through everything that we talked about and how to build better systems and why motivation fails most of the time, it's because there aren't systems in place. So just remember motivation equals unreliable systems equals sustainability. Secondly, discipline is easier when the environment supports you. So, that's a conscious thing, I think, for folks to think about. Is the current environment that you're in, and we're in several different environments throughout one's day, one's week, one's month. Are those environments supportive to you or are they not? So that's another, is this serving you well, right? Is your environment. So there is that question you got to look at too. And then thirdly is repeated success comes from design, like Leanne was just talking about, not drama. And, it's so easy to get caught up in the drama and the chaos and all that. And that's where we hope, that we've given you those tools to help increase your awareness of when drama, your self-awareness to notice when drama is occurring and chaos is occurring and design is not occurring for you. So those are the three top tips. Is there anything else you want to put in there, Leanne?
No, I just want to say stop trying to become a different person overnight. That's not what it's about. But you
Yeah,
can build a system that your current self can actually live,
yeah,
right? Like it's not about I'm going to change everything about who I am. Like we know that that's difficult. Changing is difficult, but implementing systems is actually easy. And
yeah,
we want our current self to be able to actually live with it so our future self can benefit, right? That's really the key.
absolutely. Okay. Next, our top books and
So
resources.
I know that we've discussed these books before, right? This is not the first time these books have come into but I just want to recap because I think they're so valuable in this space. So the first one is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And this is one of the most practical books on behavior change. This book shows you how small daily actions compound into remarkable results, right? Like they really do. It gives you clear examples that lasting change comes from systems, identity shifts, and the environmental design, not motivation alone. So we know that motivation can't support us. And the I suppose the takeaway from this book is that you do not rise to your goals, you fail or fall to your system. And I think that's so interesting, right? We
Mhm.
fail and fall to our systems. So get better systems in place. The second book is Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. And this book really teaches how tiny, easy behaviors create momentum and lasting change and to celebrate. I watched the YouTube by him yesterday, which is we've got linked here as well. But to celebrate that. So Fogg's method removes overwhelm and shows that success often starts with actions so small that they feel effortless. So it's not floss your whole teeth, it's floss one tooth. And then tomorrow you might do two, but make it small and stack. right? So it's a reminder that consistency beats intensity. Consistency is always going to be the cure all. If we go in with intensity, we're going to burn out. If we go in with small, consistent things, we're going to sustain that over the long term. And then the last one is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And, this one specifically explores the science behind habits and how routines shape personal and professional success. And routines is another word for systems, is another word for habits. He explains that the habit loop, the cue, reward, cue, routine, reward loop in detail, and how to understand it and how to actually use it to create better outcomes and better systems for yourself by looking at what are the cues, what are the routines or the behaviors that I do, and what's the reward that I'm getting for it, and where can I change that. So this one's really great for learning why repeated behavior becomes automatic. And you know that we love the neuroscience behind everything. So it's a great book.
Yeah.
Then we've got a couple of resources to watch. So the first one is Forget Big Changes, Start with Tiny Habit by BJ Fogg. It's about 17 minutes. It's a YouTube, quite entertaining. But again, it talks about tiny little incremental things. So worth the watch. The second one is interesting. It's The Habits of Happiness. And, our moods can be habitual. So this one really shares with us. It's actually a Buddhist monk who's doing this TED Talk, but really goes into looking at how can we cultivate happiness. We're not talking about, spontaneous joy that can erupt from a something. It's more the ongoing habitual sense of well-being and wellness and happiness. So another really good one. And then the last one also that I wanted to talk about here is by Andrew Huberman, um, and it's about habits and dopamine. Now, this one is a deep dive. It's a deep dive. There's a lot of information around neuroscience and around what happens in the brain when we have dopamine spikes. Dopamine is the feel good chemical, but also when we have dopamine deficits, when it goes down, and how to try and increase those dopamine levels so we can have a equilibrium, like a steady flow often. And then there's also other YouTubes that we've got in there around James Clear and BJ, right? So again, we've already spoken about those ones, tiny habits and the systems in place. So feel free to watch them. I'd highly recommend them, but I really liked the one on happiness, actually, I have to say, because we can choose that at any particular time.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Awesome. Okay, so our next episode is episode 27 on boundaries equal self-respect, protecting your time, energy, and identity. So it's going to be next week, May 6th, LA at 4:30 p.m. and May 7th in Sydney, Australia at 9:30 a.m. So we're super excited about next week's conversation and getting into everything around boundaries and how it equals self-respect. And as always, this is a snapshot of the remainder part of our series. And I think with that, we are ready for our closeout.
Yeah. And just before we go into close, I just want to remind you all that you're not broken. It's not a problem in discipline. It's just that you've been unsupported. And you do not need more motivation. What you do need is a system that works when motivation wanes and disappears, right? So hopefully you're clear on that now. It's not a me issue, it's a system issue, and I can put systems to support the me. And I think that's really the takeaway for today. And I know for me, I've had to put systems in place, and there are more that I'm putting in place because there's a lot I want to achieve. And if I don't have good systems, then I'm not doing the work. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And that is the power of being a human being.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct.
So thank you for joining our conversation today on systems over motivation, why discipline isn't the answer.
We hope that it sparks something new for you, an insight, a fresh perspective, question worth asking or exploring now, or a system that you're going to implement.
Absolutely. And always here at Let's Talk, our mission is simple: to have the conversations that matter and to remind you that you don't have to figure out this complex thing called life alone, because we're here to support you through our conversations and to give you little tips, tricks, and gold nuggets and some tools to put in your human toolbox to you can reach into when you need to do whatever it is that you need to do. And from this episode is build those healthy systems that will support you so that you can continue to move through life powerfully and achieve what you want to achieve.
Absolutely. So, as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like it, share it with a friend, subscribe, and keep the conversation going with us.
Because when we talk,
we really talk.
And anything is possible.
So, let's talk.
With real conversations
and limitless possibilities. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
See you next week.